So will we always get back to baseline if we rest enough, or are there ways to lower your baseline dopamine levels? And if there is, how do you get them back up again?
Yeah. So the quickest way to deplete your dopamine and to end up in a vicious, often dangerous cycle of pursuit is any of the classic addictive drugs. So especially the drugs that trigger dopamine release. So cocaine and amphetamine are the most famous for creating the most dopamine release. And as a consequence, what happens is, okay, so let's say, I'll just say it. I mean, no one should use these drugs. These are very destructive for the following reason. The first time somebody uses cocaine or amphetamine, they get a massive increase in dopamine because of the way those drugs are chemically structured. Then the next time it's a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less. And then they use either the same amount or progressively more and more. And they're now dropping below baseline just to get to normal, right? Any addict knows this. Now, behaviors can do the same thing. For some people, these are called process addictions, but shopping addiction, sex addiction, porn addiction, adrenaline addiction. I mean, people have different people have their things. Some people have less of an addictive personality, some people more. There's some genetic biases there in terms of there's certainly circumstantial biases, right? If we know one thing for sure, if someone never has access to a drug, they're less likely to abuse that drug. I'm not talking about out of mind. Yeah. Oh, that's well established. I mean, I'm not getting into the legal or political side of this, but there are other dangers with making certain things illegal too. So, that's a political legal discussion. But in terms of the biology, the key here is to understand that the bigger the dopamine increase, the bigger the crash, and the less likely it is that you'll ever continue to achieve pleasure from that thing. So let's take it to maybe a less sinister set of examples. Let's say you're the kind of person that likes exercise. But now you decide, I love exercise. But now you decide you're going to listen to music while you exercise, which itself kind of boosts your dopamine. Great, that's great. But now that peak is getting a little bit bigger. Now let's say you're like me and you like a double espresso before doing any exercise. Great. And then now let's say you add to that one of the more high potency pre-workout drinks that are out there with, say, L-tyrosine, which is the amino acid precursor to dopamine. Great. I've taken those. There's some terrific ones out there. You feel like you can conquer the world plus music. Okay, great. Now let's say you do that a few times and you notice you need a bit more of the pre-workout drink, the music to be a little bit louder, and it doesn't quite feel like the first time. Right. So what's happening is you're starting to do what's called dopamine layering or stacking. You're starting to bring in more and more things. People will there are natural behaviors that for evolutionary reasons make perfect sense. Human reproduction is closely tethered to the dopamine system. And I'm not just talking about sex, the verb. I'm talking also about the pursuit of a mate, the excitement about somebody new, the feeling that you don't need to sleep and life is so amazing in the early part of a romantic love. That's dopamine. That's just pure dopamine. Like the thinking about them all day, that's that shrinking of the visual aperture and the sort of cognitive aperture also, right? And then typically that will be, because evolution also understands that we need to like nourish ourselves and get sleep and live our lives and things, right? I mean, although you and I probably both know people that they fall in love and they sort of stop doing anything else besides fixating on the person.
Right.
Just a general message to people out there, like that's not conducive to the success of the relationship. Missing someone is actually a case of dopamine reward prediction error. Texting someone and not hearing back is reward prediction error in the negatives. So, right here it is. They always respond on a certain latency. It's like the slot machine, every 10th pull. Now it's like, what happened? That's that anticipation. Like, hey, what's going on? That's dopamine again. So in a typical scenario, though, we can leverage this stuff by just understanding that there's nothing wrong with dopamine peaks. There's nothing wrong with being really excited and happy and motivated. That's beautiful. But we need to toggle back and forth between dopamine states and rest states. And I think that a lot of people who are very driven or excited about the next thing, the new thing, I saw this the other day, right? Kids get ice cream, you give them ice cream, and they take the first lick of ice cream and they want to know, can we have ice cream tomorrow also? Like, Like they're completely out of the experience of it. And you're not trying to create little like Zen Buddhists where you're like, oh, wait, let's be in the experience of the ice cream. But it's so interesting to see that the way the mind works, because, and here, there's a great book about dopamine. There are two, actually, neither of which I had anything to do with, unfortunately. I would have loved to write these. But the first one is called The Molecule of More, because dopamine is all about more. If you find yourself eating a piece of chocolate and your first sense is, ooh, that's delicious, I'm savoring it, I want more. That's the dopamine system putting you into anticipation of the next little blip of dopamine. There's the book, The Molecule of More, speaks to this in a number of different ways. It's a beautiful book. The other book that talks more about sort of the pitfalls of dopamine and how it can lead to addiction, both substance abuse and behavioral addictions, is the book by my colleague at Stanford, Dr. Anna Lemke, who runs our dual diagnosis addiction clinic. She's a MD and psychiatrist, and it's called Dopamine Nation. And it's about dopamine and how it can take us down these somewhat complicated paths. She actually talks about her own behavioral addiction that she developed and explains that. And the solution to this is generally 30 days at least of no interaction with whatever the thing is, which for some people might seem excruciating, but that's generally the reset.